question number one is, of course, we're moving on to autonomous cars. And the first question is about the detection, especially when it comes to intersections. So the question is, can autonomous cars detect intersections with 100% efficiency? Because sometimes the intersections cannot be seen, and also past the intersection when we're driving, the speed limit doesn't apply. So could autonomous vehicles make mistake intersections for property driveways? Maciej, let me start with you. It seems like a technical question.
Yes, hello everybody. It's nice to be here. I didn't listen Rafał before, but now everything with voice is okay. About this, I think this question is very important, but I'm not sure I am right person to answer that question, because my area of expertise is the railway vehicles and not exactly detection systems. But in my opinion, of course, if we do everything properly, if we make all programming properly with LiDAR and detection systems, it is always possible to have right and properly movement of car during this operation in the street. And I think everything is depend on the technology and depend on programmer, I think.
Thank you. Robert, what do you think? Can autonomous vehicles mistake intersections for property driveways?
Yeah, for me, actually, this is always a question: how should I test it to assure that it works properly, just like it was said before? So, of course, we have LiDARs, we have lasers, which are spreading the intersection and detecting some objects. But for me, the question is how this output from LiDAR can be precise enough, and how this technology can know that this is really intersection. So I would say that I find quite some risks there, because if we have intersection which is typical, what we expect or what the car should expect, then it is fine. But if we have something which is not common, and the artificial intelligence was not trained to detect it, then I think could be potential problem.
Is it more? Let me just follow up. Is it more to do with the software, do you think, or the hardware in those detectors?
Well, I think hardware is actually complete. I wouldn't say that we need anything more from hardware, because in the car we have apart from LiDAR, we have also the cameras. So a lot of items are connected to the car, to the software. It is more with software, in fact, and the training of this software with artificial intelligence by some examples, models, references.
Michał, what's your take on all this?
I largely agree with Robert here. I mean, I don't really have much more to add to what he already has said, but maybe just that I wouldn't be so optimistic about the sensors as he is. I mean, I think that LiDAR and radar and cameras and thermal imaging all together can work, of course, to do this, but it's how you put them into the same package that is still a challenge, right? So how do you make them work all together to detect an object? And here, artificial intelligence is just one of the ways in which we could do that with machine learning, right? And there is no data, as far as I know. We don't have enough real-world data to train a model as to what an intersection is, right? That's just too much to be done yet.
Okay, so are systems being trained in that, in getting the data or analyzing this data, do you know?
Do I know? Oh, I'm sure they are. I mean, as you know, there are lots of Google cars that are driving around taking photographs. But then there's the hard work of labeling the data set as either an intersection or a driveway. And I think to do that, you need a lot of hours of work. I'm not sure where the progress is on this, but I'd be surprised if there are cars now that could tell the difference between an intersection and a driveway.
Okay, moving on to the next question, just staying with you, Michał, and just to let you know very briefly that I don't think we can see you, we can hear you very well, but it looks like we've got no, video coming from you. But do stay with us, because the next question I would like to start with you. The question is, what about moral dilemmas? Oh, you're back on, I can see.
Okay, sorry about that.
Thank you. So yes, coming back to moral dilemmas, it seems like it's your specialty. What about those moral dilemmas with autonomous vehicles? Can they be taught how to solve the dilemmas of who to protect or who to sacrifice? It's the famous trolley problem, where a person is asked to decide who to save or who to sacrifice or who to kill ultimately. And it looks like in this issue, a lot of people might be involved. So there's the driver, there might be groups of people, there can be small children. So once again, can the autonomous vehicles be taught how to solve these dilemmas?
Of course. I think that there's no question here that we can even start with as simple as if-then statements, right? If you see a child, then don't run it over. I think that the challenge is very similar to the challenge with intersections and driveways, in that there are many exceptions to the rule, right? So if you have a child in front of you, but if you turn left, you will crash into a wall and kill the driver, should you still avoid hitting the child, is the real question, right? And I think at this point, we're not yet able to build a machine like that. If we could, I think there would have to be a lot of work done in logic and in turning normative theories, so theories about what's right and wrong, into computable form. I'm not sure how that's going. Frankly, I don't think we're there yet, but that would be the way to do it. But frankly, these are the sorts of problems I think that are just a small drop in the bucket of moral or ethical dilemmas. To come back to your first question about autonomous vehicles, they are also legal issues that have to do with insurance, with a liability, responsibility, all the same issues that come up with all autonomous systems, that come up again here in the legal sphere, and furthermore, social issues that have to do with downstream consequences of actually having these be a part of the infrastructure. What will happen with taxi drivers? Right, or
yes, of course,
bus drivers, etc. So, I mean, I think these are more moral dilemmas in a sense in which that we have to address as a society, not only as an autonomous car, right?
If I can just follow up, how coming back to those autonomous vehicles and how they're going to learn. How are they going to learn? Are they going to be taught directly from people? So it's like, you guys, the philosophers, you sort out the problems first and then put the data, the algorithms, the solutions into those machines. Or are they going to be self-teaching using AI, for example?
Are you asking me this question?
Yes.
Well, I think that, artificial intelligence is a very broad term, and it encompasses a lot of techniques. Some of them are top down in a way in which you just described, where you program something in. But others that involve deep learning or machine learning, these are going to be the more bottom-up things. And I think that there's room for both here, right? I think that there's room for both, and you'd probably need a hybrid of the two approaches to approximate whatever it is that we mean when we say solving a moral dilemma. I don't think that one of these will be the silver bullet, so to speak.
Thank you very much. Maciej, what's your take on those moral dilemmas?
First of all, I would like to go back to previous question, because in next month we plan to test some LiDAR devices in our tram, Nevelo, and we would like to collect some LiDAR data from the city, and it would be nice to see how the intersections are recognized by the LiDAR system, and this data will be open, and if some of our guests here would like to see how it's looking, we are open and we could share with this LiDAR data with you. But if we go back to this question about moral dilemma, my opinion is that the system, whole autonomous transport system, should be designed such for that there is no possibility to occur such situation when the vehicle program or other vehicle needs to decide who to kill. Yes, we shouldn't allow to such situation on the street, on the train track, to situation when there is need for such decision. On my opinion.
Okay, so what you're saying, they should not be taking any decisions by themselves, just let the thing that is already going on happen. Okay, so that's one of the solutions to the trolley problem, I guess. Thank you so much. Robert, what do you think?
Yeah, concerning this data from LiDARs, I would be the first maybe here in this group interested.
Me too, by the way.
Okay, that's great.
Notice, yes.
Because even for sitting in the evening and looking what is happening around, it's very interesting for me. And regarding if the machines should be learned by themselves, what kind of decision makeup? I think for me this is always a problem, because first, I wouldn't even in my testing or QA career, I always try to keep or to maintain the human factor in testing, because I have found out that human can do a lot of things still better than the machines, and I wouldn't like to leave the machine completely controlled, because even if you have test automation or we have any automated process, there are still some errors introduced, because human or the computer can execute as much as the human told it to do or programmed it. So I think human factor is very important here, and I think we cannot. So I think about hybrid solution that Michał has mentioned could be something successful.
Can I follow up on this?
Mm-hmm.
Please, yes, of course.
Okay, so I've a maybe not so funny story about this. So a few years ago, I gave a talk about autonomous cars and trolley problems in Iraqi University of Kurdistan in Erbil. And this was around the time when there was a final offensive against the Islamic State. So this was very much on these people's minds. And there I am talking about autonomous cars while they're bombs that are being dropped about 30 miles away. And I say, well, you know, we could train these models up to sort of learn what's right from wrong. And of course, in this crowd, somebody raises their hand and asks me, well, why would we do that? We know what's right and wrong. It's in the Quran. Right? So
right, okay.
At this point, you know, I realized, well, maybe I'm a little bit over my head here being in a position to tell other people what may be right or wrong. They might have their own ideas about it. And I think we should acknowledge that whatever it is that will be right or wrong for one group of people with respect to these cars in one place is not going to be the same in another. All right.
So it looks like we operate on the premise that there are still questions to be asked and answered while the new technology is coming in. And if I understood you correctly, Michał, there are people with all the questions asked and all the answers given already. So they will have a very clear guideline about how to approach that. And it seems like they don't need to be wondering about whether any approach should be changed. I'm sorry, Robert, I thought you wanted to chip in.
Yes. Actually, I wanted to add something from my side as well, because very often I thought about some options available for the driver, and now Michał has just said that, okay, why shouldn't we be taught if we know what is wrong and right? For different persons, it will be different. So do we allow such situation that we have in the car the option panel with options that we can choose? For instance, what is we could simply have it personalized for ourselves. That's a crazy question that comes to my mind, but it's bothering me.
It's a real question. I mean, it's a real question. Unfortunately.
I'm thrilled about it because I don't know if I could be able to set these options. And now imagine that, okay, we are developing some products, and there is a QA department, or Q quality control department, which is testing this. We should have some reference, and we should simply check if this works in accordance to specification. So if the product is working correctly, that means according to specification, I'm fine with this. So I have done my job well. But anything which is not stated in the specification, then I have a problem because I don't know, maybe that it is wrong. All right.
Well, and is there a specification for right and wrong, morally speaking, that you could reference, right? Exactly right. And this is a great point that speaks directly to the first question about intersections, I think, because we deal with these moral dilemmas every day, all the time, right? And we just act, and it's quick. And we just know what to do. More often than not, we get things approximately correct, even though every time we have a different situation, right? Should I help someone cross the street? Should I buy this in the store or that? This is for us easy. It is not easy for a machine. A non-stable environment in which things are changing and every time are different. Are not the sorts of environments where AI performs at its best, right? So, I love this question that you raised about specifications. I mean, I think that's just like a great example of what's wrong with this way of thinking about morals. Thanks for that.
Okay, let me follow up with a question we've got from the audience about this whole business. So the question is, do we really discuss some artificial intelligence, or is everything programmed, in a sense, programmed, and nothing is in fact learned without the developer intervention? Robert?
If I may start here, I think nothing can be learned without human intervention. Because if we pass to artificial intelligence incorrect reference, then the artificial intelligence will think it is correct. So I would say it's impossible.
Yes, I also agree that everything begins from the developer intervention, and everything, even the AI is on the beginning is programmed. This is my opinion.
Okay, let me move on to the next question, if I may, and it's about people and societies and their reactions. So are these societies' reactions taken into account in the development of autonomous cars? What I mean by that is that there's a potential risk of maybe mass protests or acts of vandalism, lack of trust, etc. This new technology, for example, you've already mentioned that, gentlemen, can leave a lot of people unemployed, whether it's taxi drivers or truck drivers. So are there any plans, for example, for retraining these people, or will the implementation be spread over time, maybe, so that such jobs will decrease gradually? Maciej, what do you think?
Yes, I think that it's depend on point of view. Yes, point of view of driver, taxi driver, or tram driver, bus driver. This is dangerous. Yes, because probably they will be opposite because they probably they lose their job. But in point of view of the user, I think it doesn't matter if the taxi will come with a driver or without a driver. I need to go from point A to point B, and I need to go in safe, fast and safe way. Yes, and of course, before we started our test on the tram, we also was aware that maybe will be some opposition from the public transport operator. Yes, because they have a lot of people who work as a tram driver, a lot of employees. But on the beginning, we said that we don't want to replace them. We want to make some kind of assistance. And then the reaction was very positive. All of them want to know more about this project, sometimes help us, advise us, and this is the reason. But if we start on the beginning to say, okay, we made autonomous tram and we don't need you anymore because the tram will go alone through the city, then probably we have to face up some protests, some negative behavior to our project.
Thank you. Robert, what's your take on people's reactions and possible issues?
Yes, I think that point of view is very important here. So speaking about the persons who are the drivers, and now they cannot work or have no ability to work further, this may be difficult. Maybe I should simply say a word from quality engineers' point of view. I had already some situations where we had a discussion. Okay, we are developing some automated tests, so the testers are not needed anymore. And I said, no, you are really very much needed in defining the objectives, in defining the test cases, in making this process better. And let's leave the calculations or test execution boring stuff to automate. So from my point of view, I would say that by having this autonomous systems, automated in general, I would say, we can shift our work to another place. We can do this, and by this we can make even these products better. But of course, from point of view of drivers, this could be difficult.
Okay, so Michał, to follow up again, the question is: do we delay? Do we spread it over time? Do we take care of people's possible reactions? We may not be able to foresee them all.
I've heard this story about how automation and technological innovation will actually increase productivity and decrease the amount of work that we have to do for quite some time. And if you look at the data, it looks like we're working more than ever.
Exactly.
So I'm not sure about that particular relationship being so straightforward. I'm of course concerned about the bus drivers and so on, but I am a lot less optimistic than Maciej is about people. actually accepting them. So I live in Eindhoven in the Netherlands, and they actually had a system like this here at some point. There are remnants of it throughout the city where there are actually just lanes for buses, and no cars can drive on them at all, because these used to be lanes for autonomous buses. And they started this program, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago or something. Philips was involved, and people stopped using buses. There was a backlash. Now, where is it coming from, and why is it there? It's not entirely clear. There were studies done on this, but I think this was a combination of the fact that these were cars and not trams. So there was a certain amount of uncertainty and risk that I think was perceived with buses that wouldn't be perceived in an autonomous tram or train. And I think also people felt uncomfortable. It was an implicit discomfort with just being in a bus that's driven by a non-person. So they had to convert all the buses here back to having drivers. Right, so they spent a lot of money on this, thinking in this exact way that you're thinking right now, Maciej, and it was gone to waste. So I think that we should do more research before we sort of introduce these kind of automated solutions without just assuming that they're going to be accepted. I don't think it's that straightforward.
We've got a follow-up question from the audience here, and it's again touching up on the famous problem of machines taking over jobs. And the question is, wait, has this problem not been solved in the past? The author of the question says, I'm not so good at history, but similar issues were faced, for example, in England in the 19th century during the Industrial Revolution. And again, the famous example, I think, is weaving machines or textile machines, where they were replacing people, and there was a huge backlash back then. On the one hand, I would think the history repeats itself in this regard. On the other, I remember reading a piece in The Economist not a long time ago, and The Economist was saying, yes, it's happening again, but this time it is real. So is the technology so far advanced that it is time to worry that jobs will be lost? Or maybe we should be looking forward to, working only 2 or 4 hours a day, Robert?
Yeah, that's. I think this is inevitable if we want to evolve, to have. Okay, I wanted to say better life, but this may have different meaning. But if you want to feel comfort, and then we need something that will drive us to the center of town. If you want to feel comfortable, not to looking for some parking place, let's just leave it to the autonomous vehicle. So each time, okay, speaking about the Industrial Revolution, I think it will always be like that. That people will want something different, better for them at the moment. I don't think that we can stop it. For instance, I have maybe a bit not off topic, but when I was living in Toulouse for a couple of years, I used their metro, which is it's not a big one because it has only 2 lines, but it is driverless. So you enter the tram, and there is no driver. You can sit in the front of the wagon, and you can observe what is happening. And even then, I had to just try it a bit for myself to keep confidence with this. But it's working fine, and I found it really, really great. Okay, the question is, where is this driver working now? I don't know really.
Okay, thank you so much, Maciej.
Yes, I think we need some compromise. Maybe I go back to the example from Netherlands, from the buses. Maybe the good way will be not to to replace the buses or rebuild the buses for classical one, but maybe we should put some kind of attendant who will sit on the front, and the passenger will know that he could react in case of emergency. Yes, maybe he could only supervise the travel of this bus, and I think always in such new technologies is some kind of uncertainty, and people have time to convince to some new solutions. What we should know that also, if we talk about accidents in transport, especially in public transport, car accidents, all of them are made by human factor, or human mistake. Yes, and if we replace the human, probably this transport will be much safer. Of course, we will not avoid some accidents, but will be much safer than now.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I have to push back on this. Maciej, I really like that we're disagreeing on this. This is really wonderful. So I think you're right, actually, in all that you said, but there's another angle to this that's really important that I think we have not discussed yet, and we should. And that's that these autonomous systems, they don't have a human in the loop, right? They're going to be enormously complex. And already at this point, we know that there can be outside third-party interference to these systems, right? Either by intention or by hacking or whatever. So their accidents aren't actually the main problem. The problem is actually someone deliberately or just for fun breaking the system. If you don't have a person in the loop, right, you have absolutely no way of dealing with that. But if you do have a person in the loop, right, they could just press the brake or do something. They can react in a novel way to the situation. This problem, of course, arises in every area of automation, but just think about it in context of autonomous vehicles that would be used in war.
Yeah.
Not right. I mean, this is a playground for hackers, and I think that's one of the bigger moral issues with autonomous vehicles. Actually, a lot more so than the trolley problem, which in some case it will come up, but it'll be rare. But the problem of hacking will be there for forever.
I think the picture that I've got in mind at this stage is the Docklands light railway system in London. It's been in operation since late 80s, maybe, if I remember correctly. And it is autonomous in the sense that there is no driver. However, it's got a separate track, so there is no intersection between DLR and cars or trams. But yes, there is always a person there, an attendant. And if you look around, you can see, okay, there is a guy there, so maybe, he's there to pull on the brakes if necessary. And, from a sort of human perspective, the emotional perspective, I thought it was comfortable or comforting to see somebody there and to realize that there is a person, hopefully taking over if there's a need. Okay, let's leave it at that, and let me move on to something that's maybe sort of close to the London's Dockland Light Railway. So let's talk about autonomous trams. So what are the implementation plans in Poland and maybe other countries? Is full autonomy possible of those autonomous trams, or will it be driver assistance only? Maciej, let's start with you.
Okay. As I said on the morning on my presentation about autonomous trams, there is any commercial operation now of such type of vehicle in autonomous mode of movement, and there was also some most advanced pilot project made by Siemens, and they have some kind of tram tested in Potsdam in Germany. But I think the tram traffic is different than road traffic and also different with rail metro traffic, yes, because there is a lot of issues and there's this complex problem with not only with driving the tram through the track, but also with connections with other cars, pedestrians, cyclists. And what is, I think, the most important in case of autonomous tram operating in the normal city traffic is the braking distance, yes, and in tram is not with tram haven't possibility to avoid obstacles like autonomous cars, yes, and this is the main problem. And I think it takes a lot of years when we have such type of tram moving in the city center especially. But of course, we could introduce such system in separate track in the city, and some part of the line could be autonomous, 5-6 kilometers when the track is fully separated. Yes, but in normal traffic, it will be the problem, especially for lidar radars, because every time there is some obstacles, maybe driver could avoid this, ignore, because he know that it disappear in the moment. But what will do the system, we don't know. And I think riding such tram will be very uncomfortable. That, in my opinion, we will develop some kind of assistance for tram drivers in the future. And also another issue is the formal issue. There is no any regulation now in Poland, and maybe I think also in Europe, regulation which will allow to operate such vehicles in normal road traffic. Yes, that's all.
Thank you. Robert, what's the thinking? Full autonomy or driver assistance?
I'm thinking also about the regulations and norms here. So this is not that straightforward response. The truth is that we do not have the regulations from point of view of ISO directives regarding autonomous vehicles. There are some attempts of adopting the functional safety ISO 26262 for automotive for autonomous cars, but it is not really finished yet. So we do not have these regulations. Okay, we can apply a lot of let's say chapters to this software, but this is still a problem. So currently, I would say that we have very well described ADAS. So this is advanced driver assistance systems that help the driver to see more. So this is connected with augmented reality. So the car can stop faster, can find the objects faster. But the question is if this stopping this vehicle is a good decision that is made by the system. So I would really keep for the moment with driver assistance.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so driver assistance here. I mean, from Robert, Michał, your take?
Yeah, I don't think that the legal systems are ready for this. The technical challenge is one thing, and the ethical, moral issues and the social consequences are important, of course, as well. But the real problem, as far as I could see, is that we don't have a legal framework to deal with accidents caused by autonomous vehicles. We don't have a legal framework to assign responsibility, liability. How do we insure cars? How do we insure trams? How do we insure people? right? And as far as I know, there is no legal framework for this yet. So until there is one, I would much rather not see fully autonomous cars. Trams, I mean, I have seen them and they work, but as long as they're in a closed loop system, like in an airport or something, right? I wouldn't want to see them on a street where they can be in an accident.
So you keep mentioning, all of you, a lot of aspects. So this is software, this is hardware, this is artificial intelligence, this is legal framework. So I think a very simple question from the point of view of a user is an autonomous tram then easier to implement than other vehicles like cars, for example? Robert.
Do we talk about the rail track or?
Let's say yes, yeah, a tram that has actually got a separate rail for itself.
So actually, this is far easier, I would even say, than the car. Although what was mentioned before, that we have actually in the center of city we have a lot of unknowns, like you know, different objects. I wouldn't like to call I would like just to say it in general. But we have a lot of unknowns, but if we are talking about the separate track, or in the place where there is no risk that someone could enter the track, then it's better. It's just like with this example from Metro in Toulouse. I would say that I was really confident with this one, even that, but I was sure that nobody could enter the track, because from the platform is isolated with the glass door, and you cannot really fall onto the track. But it was very easy because it was very deterministic. You could just, if you want to stop the wagons, you just pass to some certain area where is a switch which detects, okay, we should stop here, and we are just stopping. So from my point of view, it is much easier. Easier,
okay. Maciej, what's your perspective on that?
Yes, I agree with Robert that if we talk about separated track, it's much easier to do this than in the car, because we have one problem out with turn left, right, yes, avoid obstacles, etc. And this is the reason. But we need separated track without any disturbance during the tram or other ride vehicles. Right, that is the future, I think, of this.
Okay, thank you. Let me look back just quickly to the beginning of our discussion, because again, we've got a question from the audience, and it touches upon, again, the hardware versus software issue. And the question is, you said that everything depends on code, but what about data loop speed on processors? How many sensors can we read as fast as we need to, Robert?
I think computers are really much faster than humans. So they can make up the decision much faster than we do. The question is if they are making up the correct decision. So I only see that point here.
Okay, Michał, in your world, are you happy with what the processors can do with the sensors and the data coming from them?
Well, I mean, I'm not an engineer working on interfaces between multi-sensor systems, so I can't really speak to this directly, but I have mentioned earlier that I think this is still a challenge, because the cars that we're speaking about, or vehicles, they won't have just one sensor or two, they'll have 20 or more, and they'll all be working in real time on their own clocks, and there'll be a additional problem about how to integrate them. So I think this is a valid question to ask, whether we should think that the real problem is just in the code, in the software. I think that all the hardware issues are not solved yet. I mean, the sensors are you know, relatively crude if you look at it. So LIDAR and radar and they're not good enough to give us the sort of resolution that we would need to recognize objects for what they are, right? We need to use more than one source. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Maciej, what's your take on the currently available processors?
Yes, I really think in that what is the important, not only the, I would like to go back that everything depends on the developer, on the engineer, because we could have very high-end software, hardware, everything, but we have to know where to install that sensors. Yes, how many of them install it. This is the very important issue. We have to know what to measure and when and where to measure some inputs from the environment of such vehicle, and this is very, very important. And then if we know that that is correct, we tested it, then we'll be sure that such system is safe.
Okay, let me move on to the next question and stay with you, Maciej, because it's, I think, the main subject of the whole conference today. It's about testing and security. So the question is, will autonomous cars undergo rigorous security tests? I mean, tentatively, the answer is probably, hopefully, yes. But the researchers have previously managed to take control over a Jeep, for example, and drive it remotely. And there have been several instances of hackers being able to take over control of autonomous vehicles. And then in the future, when suppose most cars on the road are autonomous, will we be able to avoid attacks where vehicles could be taken over on a mass scale?
This is a question for me, but I think I'm not the right person to answer this question. I give my voice to Robert. I think he could say something more, because this is a very important issue, and also our colleague talking about this case of hacking, etc. And I think this safety in case of software safety, so all security issues are also very, very important. But on the technical point of view, I think Robert has some ideas and something could say something more than me.
Okay, Robert, fire away.
Yeah. So I just wanted to start. Yeah, that's true. That we have to take care about this even more than before. What I can tell you, what is happening normally when we create this software and test it. For each feature that we have in the car, we have to perform a so-called risk analysis. So that means if we are having a feature on the table, we have to identify the risk. So think of the potential scenarios that can go wrong. And then we should continue not only identifying okay, something may happen wrong, but we have to think of methods or ways for mitigation of this risk. So to make it not even happen. And then we have a third step, that we have to prepare something that will remove this risk if it happens. So this is not these are not very simple approaches. I mean, we have to put a lot of effort in it because we have to sit all together. There is a business analyst, there is a software architect, there is a QA engineer, and they are sitting all together and think what may go wrong. So that's true. If we identify such a risk, we have to assure that even if it happens, we have a backup plan.
Right, okay. Michał, over to you. So rigorous tests of vicious gangs of hijacked vehicles.
Vicious gangs of hijacked vehicles, without a question. So our future will be grim. No question in my mind about that, unless we have a very different approach to security and safety than a bunch of people sitting around a table thinking about what may go wrong. If this is what we're going to be doing, these things will get hacked, and they will be used as weapons. They'll be used as toys by people that want to use them that way. I think the ideas that I've seen for securing networks inside of autonomous vehicles that are promising involve isolating the systems into their own networks. I think that's probably the most viable technical solution at this point. We're not there yet. At this point, your car's network is more or less open. So if someone can get into one part of it, they can probably reach any other part of it. That's, I think, the key thing that needs to be fixed. We need to have isolated autonomous systems within the autonomous vehicle, so that when one of these is hacked, the whole thing can't be hacked. That's the way that I see it. If something like this isn't going to happen, we're going to have, as you said, Rafa, hordes of autonomous vehicles smashing into things all over the place.
The reason I'm thinking about all this is partly because I'm an awful driver myself, and when I want to make myself feel better about my own driving skills, I tell to myself, okay, it's the road, it's the signs, it's the other drivers, it's how the whole thing is organized. So, but I think on a more serious note, sometimes the road signs are hard to see, or they are placed in a sloppy manner, or there's a bush or a tree that's suddenly grown. Maybe the signs are not removed in time after roadworks, etc. So how do autonomous vehicles cope now, and how should they deal with such problems in the future? In other words, does the industry plan organizational and legislative work to improve this situation? Maciej?
I think I could tell you about autonomous vehicles in case of trams. I think in this case also it's much easier than in real car traffic, because the tram infrastructure are developed by the city, and we know everything about this tram infrastructure, about signs, and we could very well program it all intersection, all place where the tram should reduce speeds. In case of car, maybe it should be something like this, like navigation positioning systems, when we have some information from the central database what's happened with the situation on the road, and then we don't need to only analyze the road things by the camera, but also we have a second level from the system, and we could compare such two information. This is my idea only, but I don't know how it's really working in case of autonomous cars.
Thank you. Michał, how do you view the industry's involvement in organizing and doing the legislative work?
Well, from what I see here in the Netherlands, at least, the industry is definitely taking the issue very seriously and are front and center, working with universities, with departments such as my own, in coming up with solutions. There's also a lot of interfaces between industry, so private sector, and EU. So there is legislature and white papers that is coming out, regulations, special groups about AI that have been formed within the last few years. And I think that we should expect something like EU-wide legislative framework for autonomous vehicles relatively soon. And I think that industry will be a big part of it. I think that all the car, automotive industry in Europe, as well as companies like Philips, care about these issues a great deal. So.
Okay, thank you. Robert?
Yeah, returning a bit to the beginning of this question. One thing is this legislative part, and the second is what should the car do if it misses one source of information. So, for instance, these signs on the road, which may be turned over or simply covered with snow. In this case, again, what I said before, we have to identify the risk and say that we should somehow cope with this. So that means the easiest way could be to get information from another source. So this is something that we already observe in so-called connected cars. So the car is, and they are already in the streets, which are still in the contact, let's say, with the cloud, which provides this kind of information. So the car knows that there should be a sign, traffic sign in this place, and even knows what's exactly it is. So yeah, having these two sources of information is always better, and to minimizes the risk. And similar thing is also implemented in the avionic world. So in autopilot, we have always two different in one computer, in one autopilot, we have two different channels which are working the same way, but they are capturing the data from sibling, let's say, sensors. And if there is some discrepancy between them, autopilot simply deactivates and leaves the decision to be made up by the pilot. And yeah, from legislative side, I think there should be some solution which is also discussed altogether. So currently we are observing that companies are in competition, but I think they should be more like working all together to find the best solution.
Thank you so much. Just a reminder for our audience, you are watching TestDive, our annual conference aimed at testers organized by Nokia, and we are currently talking with our panelists about autonomous vehicles, technical and ethical issues. And just a reminder, you can post your questions in Discord, our special channel for those viewers who've subscribed to our conference. And with that, yes, let me move on to the next question. It's quite detailed, actually, but I think quite practical. Now, what is the effectiveness of road sign recognition by autonomous vehicles? For example, if a sign is slightly damaged or scratched, can they be properly read already? Michal?
I can't speak to this. I'm sorry. I'm not on the cutting edge of object recognition in AI, but in my understanding, this area is blossoming. Deep learning techniques are being developed every day, so I wouldn't be surprised if they just keep getting better and better. And even when a sign is scratched, a properly trained image recognition, camera recognition model will be able to tell that it's a sign and what sort of sign it is, perhaps even better than we could.
Robert?
Yeah, that's true. And already these methods of reading or recognizing the traffic signs are quite good. Of course, to some extent, we cannot help sometimes, but this happens also in such a way that we are not detecting the sign completely. I mean, if this is a speed limit to 60, we expect that it should have some red ring inside the white background and the number in the center. But if the car recognizes something round with red ring, that means that it could be potentially speed limit. So there is implemented so-called multi-objective recognition. So it doesn't give full information about the sign, but gives some small data that combined together may result in correct output. So this is how it is done currently. And the second point is when the car is connected with the cloud, then it knows already that there should be a sign. So it doesn't matter if it stands there or not. If there is a connection, of course. If there is a connection.
It's a fair point. Okay, Maciej, what about you and those scratched or damaged signs?
I think I totally agree with Robert that the main problem is to recognize that the road sign is the road sign. It's not something like advertisement or other else. But I think the system still developed, and it shouldn't be in the near future the problem to recognize such road sign, and also in connection with some cloud. It will be an easy problem to solve, and I think it will be not a main problem in such area like autonomous vehicles. I think the most important is the safety reasons, not safety in case of some hacking, etc. Not exactly the sign if it will be recognized or properly or not.
And finally, what do you think? What percentage of cars on the road should be autonomous to preserve safety? So on the one hand, human-controlled cars seem to pose greater risk because there can be drunk drivers, someone may faint, there's speeding, of course, etc. But on the other hand, there have been numerous accidents involving autonomous cars, and there's some skepticism towards them because of those accidents. So do you already know which is statistically safer, at least so far, human or autonomous, Michał?
I'm sorry. These are really hard questions you're asking. I would have to look at the empirical data, and as it turns out, we simply don't have enough of that, right? I mean, we'd have to compare humans and autonomous vehicles, and we just don't have enough of the autonomous vehicles to be able to tell. But of course, the promise of autonomy in vehicles is that they will be objective in some sense, right? They will always do what they're supposed to. They won't cause accidents because they're drunk. They won't cause accidents because they're terrible drivers like you. They won't cause accidents because they're tired, right? So I think that the whole reason, in some sense, why we even care about all of this is to avoid these issues. So if it turns out that at the end of all this research and development, autonomous vehicles are still no better at driving than humans, we really should have been doing something else with our time.
But picking up on this, I would love to be replaced by an autonomous vehicle if I can be proved that that vehicle is a better driver than myself. So no qualms there. Okay, Maciej, what do you think? Do you know the statistics or general kind of comparison of safety?
I don't know the statistics, but probably I could answer that 100% of cars should be autonomous, and then maybe we could say that everything will be safe if we don't talking about the safety security. It's a security problem, but it's another issue because I am opposite to you that I'm not sure if I would like to be replaced by autonomous driver because I like driving a car, yes, and I'm not sure if for me, maybe for my children, and maybe it will be a solution, but for now, for me, it's a pleasure to drive a car, even if I have to stuck in the traffic jam. If you have a very good car, you can stuck and sit there, and this is the I think also another issue if people would like to use it, such cars. Of course, if we have choose to take a taxi, autonomous or with a driver, of course this will be not a problem for me. But for now, I'm my opinion is that I would like to drive the car own by own. Yes, and And this is the question, but as I agree that we have to make some research, and maybe this research should answer what should be this percentage. But there is some statistics about the car traffic that 93% of accidents are made by human factor. Yes, 93%. This is very high. Yes, and this is maybe this is some idea for answer that question.
That's a relief for me. You know, it's comfortable to be in the majority again. Okay, Robert, what's your take on the current safety numbers or statistics?
For statistics numbers, I cannot say anything. I only have read that yearly 1,200,000 people are dying in the car accidents. But talking about the statistics, I cannot say anything more. What I wanted to say is that for sure this hybrid solution, when there is a driver and is assisted by some smart systems, let's say, or not even smart, but just giving you fast information, can help you a lot. It's like with you know, active tempomat. It's like with the rear camera, which I find really perfect solution, and this active tempomat. And I also would like to tell you about this. When I first time used the active tempomat, I really didn't trust it completely. I had to try it on first, and then I could say, okay, now I can set such a distance from my preceding car, and I feel comfortable. So that's I think the solution. And other points that some people like to drive their cars, so they don't want to change it. But in fact, yes, I would say that autonomous cars or these drivers assistant systems can react much faster and give you information about this. There is a danger on the road. There's no question about this from my point of view, that they are faster.
We've got an idea and a question from one of our viewers, and it goes back to the notion of those road signs. The viewer says, I know that such a process would take years, but would it be an idea to equip road signs with some electronic device easy recognized or recognizable by autonomous vehicles? So, for example, it could be a high power RF tag. Would this be an idea to consider, Maciej?
Yes, of course. It's an idea, but everything also depends on costs of such solution. Yes, we have to make analysis, risk analysis, and also economical, financial analysis if such solution will be good way for economic efficiency of such system. But all ideas should be analyzed and recognized. Yes.
Michał, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I thought that something like this. So, I mean, maybe this is a real question for Maciej, but I thought that something like this was already in place for trains, right? So trains actually get all kinds of automated feedback from parts of the track, and there's some standards about that. So, I mean, I assume that something really similar could be implemented on roadways, right?
Robert, what do you think? So a road sign that is scratched or unreadable, but it's emitting a signal saying, hey, I'm a 60 speed limit.
Absolutely. I think we have to be aware that when we talk about Internet of Things and connected cars, we already have this kind of solution. We call it in this case this kind of systems is called vehicle connection from vehicle to infrastructure. So this is to the road, to the signs, and we have many different other options like communication vehicle to vehicle, and this is one of the solutions. So we do not need even to put this RF high power transmitter, just like somebody suggested, but this can be already done by this 5G, let's say, infrastructure. That's the real solution. So talking about the science, just excuse me for a second, talking about the science, there are even more information that can be transmitted. For instance, between the cars, if we have this kind of connection, the car which passes you by can send you invisibly information that there is the car incident which the opposite car has passed over, and tells us to reduce the speed because there is a danger. So that's one of the solutions.
Staying with you, Robert, another question from the audience, and that's going back to software and testing. The question is, where does the developer's work finish and where does AI start in system creating? In other words, who will test the system with AI? Would it be another AI?
I would say in such a way that for some typical and low risk features, I would say that another AI can do this. But when it comes to more risky parts of the system, human has to be there. I mean, there is no possibility to do it differently. What is more, we are testing each and every system based on risk. So we cannot test each and every path in our software, because this is really infinite or extremely huge set of test cases. But we are testing based on risk. So we are just limiting the area where we can move around. So yeah,
absolutely. Yes, thank you. Maciej, so AI testing, human testing, what would you be happy with?
Yes, I also agree that on each stage of such testing, we have we need human, yes, and it's true that in some cases which are very complicated and very important, that always human have to look at this, and in case of some simple solutions, we could use AI where it's low risk of mistake, I think.
Okay, Michał, you are an expert in decision making. How would you approach this testing issue?
I'm not an expert in testing, for sure. So I think that there isn't really much content I can add to what Maciej and Robert have said, but maybe just mention that there are AI techniques that don't only rely on low-level things, right? So if you want to test for vulnerabilities in a system, I can't imagine AI being useful there as well. And vulnerabilities here, I'm thinking things like security, breach of a protocol, etc. I mean, these are things that probably an AI could do. So, but maybe that's no different from what you guys have said.
Before we wrap up, gentlemen, may I ask you to share maybe a personal story with the whole business of those automated, autonomous vehicles, transport systems? I remember one of my very early experiences with this. It would have been almost 30 years ago, my first time in London, and I walked into this Docklands light railway car where there was no driver, and I was amazed how wonderfully automated it was, how precise it was, and how reliable it was. So again, I'm not talking about official statistics right now, but as a user, I can feel how often the regular London Underground fails and how reliable DLR is. What are your personal sort of experiences that you can tell us, Robert?
I have already mentioned the example from Toulouse Metro, which is automatic, let's say, and I felt it on my own skin. And first, I didn't trust too much. Entered, had a try, walked in front and in the back, and then I found that okay, I got more and more confidence. And I have also observed something else, which may be interesting here as well. That this metro is, of course, monitored by some central point by the human. So in case there is a danger, I was sure that someone will react. I knew about this, but I also have noticed, and that's interesting thing, that people were really disciplined and rigorous, and have never entered, almost never, when it was very full. So they just stayed on the platform and waited for the next tram, which was coming in within really 2 or 3 minutes. So I think that from one point we have automated system which we should trust, but from the second side there are also this society which is I wouldn't like to say educated, but they are aware of what may wrong happen if they are just misuse these systems. And I really found it, good. It was a really good thing that I have observed, and I was really impressed.
Of course, knowing that there's another car or train coming in 2 or 3 minutes, it's really kind of comforting and helps you keep your cool, I'm sure. Okay, Maciej, your story?
Yes, my personal story was a couple of years ago when I went in Germany, in Nuremberg city, and what was surprised me that they have of course underground, they have a metro system, and on the same line move the autonomous vehicles and vehicles with the drivers, and this is very interesting that there was not our separated line, not only equipped with autonomous vehicles, but one train was autonomous, another one was standard classical with a driver, and this is of course some idea that such systems, such vehicles could operate with people, and also maybe in car system also we could try to do that. And this is my first example about this type of the train, and of course on the beginning for me it was something very new, and I was a bit afraid, but we know now that such systems, such trains, metro or other trains, are well developed in different countries, and this is unusual. And also we're talking about city of Krakow. They also would have to build a metro system. Now there is some feasibility study under preparation, and also I think the next step and such system will be equipped with autonomous vehicles. I'm sure that this is the only way. If we will develop such systems in the future in the cities, it will be systems which are developed in autonomous vehicles inside.
Thank you. Michał, your story, is it going to be from the underground in New York?
Well, no, there are people there, fortunately. Even though, I mean, it could be from there because it's a similar story. But so near New York, there are 3 airports. There's LaGuardia, JFK, and then there's Newark. And Newark is in a different state, but it's considered to be a airport in New York City. There was at some point implemented one of these autonomous monorails there that would go around, and those are relatively common in all sorts of airports. But when it first arrived, this was relatively new, it was not done well. Right. In fact, I know that there were accidents. This thing fell off the monorail at some point. But my personal experience of this thing at first was that it just started skipping stations. And I remember to this day the terror of being inside of a train that is moving on its own, right, without a driver, so you can't reason with it. And you have absolutely no control. You have no idea what it is that this thing's going to do. You could just keep going, right? So maybe that colors some of the opinions that I have about, cars in the future. But yeah, that's my story.
Okay, lovely, perfect. Thank you very much for those stories, and thank you very much for your time and for your expertise and taking part in our panel on autonomous vehicles and the technical and ethical issues behind them. Just to remind our viewers, our panelists were Maciej Michnej. He's an assistant professor in the research unit of technical reliability and maintenance at the University of Kraków, the Kraków University of Technology. Robert Oleśkiewicz, test manager at Global Logic Poland, and Michał Klincewicz, an assistant professor in the Department of Cognitive Science and Artificial Intelligence, Tilburg University. Thank you very much for your expertise. Thank you very much for your time. This was our panel.